Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I like license plates. Got a whole bunch of them behind me. A couple people said, hey, Steve, check the story out about Maine. Maine has begun removing naughty license plates from the roadways. So you can get a personalized plate, pay a couple extra bucks for it, and pick what can fit on there. And generally speaking, you're limited by the number of characters your state has. But many states will also say, by the way, you can't put anything on there that's filthy or political, and it depends. And some of these things have been litigated. People have litigated whether or not they've got the right to put something on their license plate. And it seems like a whole lot to do about not a whole lot because it's, 7 or 8 characters. So to litigate a case about whether or not you can change the characters on your license plate to something else does seem to be a bit much. But I've mentioned before that the KAARME license plate behind me, that's actually the license plate off my Viper. Over here we've got Law for NYC, sent me by a guy who used to be one of the attorneys for the city of New York. And over here, Ray Zipsa was a lawyer from Illinois. Those are real license plates. And so those are personalized plates, of course, that people paid extra money to get. So the question is, can they tell you what you can and cannot put on that plate, and to what lengths can they go? And it's a fun topic, because like I said, I love license plates. So David Sharp wrote this for the Associated Press. Maine is cleaning up its roadways by removing the vulgarities from license plates. So they're looking for vulgarities. And by the way, people are so creative. They can come up with all kinds of hidden vulgarities in just 7 or 8 letters. The state is enforcing new rules to eliminate F-bombs and other obscenities that appeared on vanity plates after the state effectively eliminated its review process. So there used to be somebody whose job it was to read license plates. And they apparently got rid of that job. And so now it's gotten worse as far as the problem goes. The state began issuing recall letters this month with a handful each day. They say it'll take a few months because it's a slow-going, tedious process. But the Secretary of State is passionate about free speech as a former director of the ACLU of Maine. But she said obscenities should not be on license plates, which are state property. And this boils down to a couple different things that conflict. The question is, who owns your license plate? Now, some states will say, we own it, but you can keep it. So it seems like a weird distinction. But I know that, I have that license plate up there, and it's mine, and I get to keep it, I'm pretty certain. Now, there are some states I've heard that if you sell a car, you've got to destroy the plates or return the plates or something. But every state's going to be different on that. But what the Secretary of State there said in Maine is, what I would say to those who want to engage in objectionable or questionable speech, get a bumper sticker. And that's an interesting distinction, is you're allowed to say these things. It's just whether the venue is correct. Can you say it on a plate that's manufactured by the state, required by the state, and they say owned by the state? So this is a bit of a head scratcher, how a bunch of descendants of Puritans in New England ended up putting some of the raunchiest messages on state-issued license plates. It started when state lawmakers all but eliminated the review in 2015 after a lawsuit successfully targeted neighboring New Hampshire's restrictions on vanity license plates. Maine's laissez-faire approach allowed what Bellows described as a wild, wild west in which motorists ordered vanity plates with blushing references to sex acts and body parts. One notorious license plate used a profanity that simply is F-U, but spelled out. Last year, the Maine legislature directed the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to reestablish rules for vetting license plates. Maine's new rules, which Bellows said, and that's the Secretary of State, track closely with New Hampshire's, bans derogatory references to age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, religion, or disability. Also banned is language that incites violence or is considered profane or obscene. And again, you almost have to respect people who can figure out how to fit all that stuff onto a license plate, but I'm just joking. A committee has been set up to review vanity plate requests along with complaints by members of the public. In Maine, there are about 124,000 vanity plates on the road with about 1.3 million residents. Previous estimates suggested there might be 400 license plates that they need to recall. And they're sending about 40 a week. So it'll be a little while. We'll see. But I can tell you a couple of things. One of which is I'm going to put on the screen as I'm talking here, if I can figure out how to do it. Adobe constantly changes how the program works. A license plate that I saw in California, which took us quite a while to figure out, and eventually we did figure it out. I'm not going to tell you what it is, though. So if you figure it out, you can put it in the comments below, but it might baffle you, because it baffled me and my friends for a little while. But it would qualify probably as being something that would be removed from the roads in Maine. So I'm going to put that on the screen right now. And I'll tell you also that my license plate, I can talk about this process in Michigan because I got that license plate and I got it during COVID. So I bought my Viper around Memorial Day 2020. And I was trying to think of a good license plate for it. And it's tough because all the good ones are taken. Somebody already has Viper, So I started thinking, well, what could I do that would be very, very, me? And I have an affinity for things from Finland. So I looked up the Finnish word for viper. And that's one of them. And it depends on whether you go with viper or snake and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, that's one of them. Now, the word should have umlauts over the A's. But that's close enough. I actually consulted several of my Finnish-speaking friends and said, you as a Finn, when you look at that, do you say, oh, it's misspelled? Or do you go, oh, I know what that means? And both of them said, oh, I would get what that means because you guys don't have the umlauts over your A's here as a potential in your alphabet. So they both said it's okay. So I got it. But I'll tell you right now, to order that plate, you go to the Michigan Secretary of State's office, and there's a plate ordering section, and it says, you can order a license plate. Would you like to order a vanity plate? And if you say yes, they say, well, check here to make sure it's not taken. That's how you know that Viper's taken and Dodge is taken. All the Lehto is taken. Bad Axe is taken. Not kidding you. And so all the good ones are taken. And so I think to myself, okay, what are the odds that someone's got the Finnish word for snake? And it turns out nobody did. So I ordered it. But I'm going to tell you right now, in the ordering process, they go, okay, what do you want the plate to say? So I put in K-A-A-R-M-E. That's it. The very next question is, what does that mean? So if you applied for the plate that said law for NYC, it'd say, what does that mean? And presumably you could type in and say, I'm a lawyer for the city of New York. I think this is appropriate. And they say, oh, okay. And I'm assuming they did that because some people are going to send in some weird gibberish and they're going to be looking at it going, what is that? And I've heard stories about things that snuck through because there are dirty words in other languages, or even things rendered in the equivalent of shorthand. And I remember reading a few years ago about somebody, and there's something about, I forgot which kind of dictation it is, but it does use things that look like characters. And so there are things you can spell out with characters that look like just gibberish, but to somebody who knows, they go, oh, oh, I don't think that's physically possible. And so they ask you what it means. Now the question is, if you submitted something that was obscene, but you thought it was hidden well enough that you couldn't figure it out, and you made something up and said, oh, it's the Hungarian word for cheese grater. And it turns out it's actually some filthy saying. Could you get in trouble for making a false statement during the application for your license plate? I don't know. I've never looked that up. But I remember at the time being kind of surprised when it says, what does that mean? I'm like, oh, okay. But I can see why they're asking. Because I think what they're getting at by doing that is they're weeding out a lot of people and go, oh, they're going to check. I probably should ask for something else. So interesting. We'll see what happens. But we'll also have to see if anybody's going to put up an argument on their plate. So let's suppose that you are in Maine. You've got a license plate that you think might be borderline racy, but it's not actually like obscene. Or I can tell you that I also saw a fight, I can't remember if this was Michigan or not, where somebody put RU486 on their license plate. And RU486 is a reference to a pharmaceutical that is tied to a procedure that is subject to much debate in our country. And so somebody got the license plate that said RU486 on it, and somebody else said, that's a political statement. I want that. I think that should not be on the road. And there's a big fight over it. I don't remember how it ended. But my point is, that many people would have looked at that and said, "What is that? Like, it's like, is that like U-235? Is that like an isotope of something? What are U-486? Is that a question? Are you 486? No, are you? I mean, I assure you that many people who saw it didn't even realize it was a license plate. That was a Vanity. They just assumed that, like, oh, it's one of them new plates. It's got 2 letters and 3 numbers for some weird reason. And so, we'll see what happens. But there might be fights coming. We'll see. But as of right now, Maine has begun removing those naughty license plates. The Associated Press ran it, and Louis sent it to me. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Laughter is the best medicine. Unless you're diabetic, then insulin comes pretty high on the list.